Are children being misdiagnosed with autism? That's the question being raised in this Telegraph article. Welcome back, friends of Ai4Autism, and a happy new year to you all. We hope you enjoyed your holidays. We kick off the new year with this video looking at this Telegraph article by Thea Jourdan. A lot of the material in this vid will be quoted verbatim, as I think there are a lot of juicy quotes here. So let's go. When autism pioneer Uta Frith started her career as a neuroscientist back in the late 60s, hardly anyone outside a small academic cohort had heard of autism, a lifelong condition which affects how people communicate and interact with the world. It was considered an uncommon disabling condition that affected a tiny proportion of children, around 4 in 10,000, said Professor Frith, now based at the Institute of Cognitive Neuroscience at University College London. When I did my PhD thesis on autism, people asked me, why would you study something so rare? And today, autistic spectrum disorders is widely known and even celebrated as a facet of neurodiversity, partly thanks to Professor Frith's efforts to raise its profile and highlight the problem of widespread underdiagnosis. Around 1 in 100 people in the UK are living with autism, according to the National Autistic Society. It's now understood that it can cause mild symptoms, or in more severe cases, include difficulties with social interaction, communication, as well as unusual sensory perception and unusual patterns of thought and physical behaviour. The numbers affected continue to rise. A study published last month, meaning last year, by the University of Exeter found that diagnoses have shot up by 787% between 1998 and 2018. But though many welcome signs of improving awareness of autism, some experts, including Professor Frith, believe we may now be overdiagnosing it. Oh dear. Let's continue. I never thought I would say this, since I was eager to embrace a widening of the diagnostic criteria, but I had no idea just how elastic it would become, says Professor Frith. The Exeter data strongly suggests that the diagnosis of autism has been stretched to breaking point and has outgrown its purpose. If the purpose is to predict what an individual's needs are, this is no longer possible. Experts agree that the rise of diagnosis of autism probably don't reflect a real rise in incidence and is instead down to increased identification. Now, Tim Nichols, head of the Policy and Public Affairs of National Autistic Society, says greater awareness about autism is causing more people to come forward, pointing out that the Autism Act of 2009 made it mandatory to have diagnostic services for adults. In the past, unless your autism was picked up as a child, you may not have been identified at all. And now, more adults are seeking diagnosis for themselves. The trend is being driven too by a broadening definition of what constitutes autism, and a better understanding of how it can present in women and girls, though boys are still 3 times more likely to be diagnosed. Now, Ashley Tompkins, 26, lives in Bournemouth and was diagnosed with autism when she was 15. She says women and girls are underestimated in the field of mental health, partly because we have a talent for masking, hiding away anything that may appear to be a problem. We are trained from early childhood to appear quiet and unobtrusive. Women are underreported because we are simply not taken seriously. Now, on a side note, here at Ai4Autism, during our hike and during our interviews, and also people we've met outside of those, have told us that they too were diagnosed later in life, women we're talking about here, simply because at the time no one noticed it, was underreported, or they were really good at masking it for many, many, many years. Moving on, let's continue with the article. She says she always knew she was different from other students at her school and was labelled a problem child, even though she was badly bullied. I think they thought I was smart but couldn't focus, was aggressive and angry, and probably a whole host of other things. She was diagnosed quite late in her mid-teens, but only began to accept her diagnosis of ASD when she went on to higher education and began to research her condition. Although she is grateful that the condition is now being recognized more widely, she is concerned that people may now assume a diagnosis of autism too readily because it is so well known. While I do think that the number of people getting diagnosed is playing catch-up, I also feel that people will take the first excuse to explain something that they don't understand. Parents of very young children will latch on to autism because it is the first buzzword they can think of. There is a worry that their confirmation bias will twist any of their children's behaviours into fitting that narrative. Now, a misdiagnosis can prevent doctors from identifying other serious ailments with similar symptoms. Joanne Hewlett says her son William was misdiagnosed with autism at the age of 7 when he was still at primary school. In fact, she now thinks he was suffering from PANDAS, an autoimmune condition where a common infection is thought to trigger behavioural problems. The condition has only recently been described and remains a controversial area. I was told he had autism, and we went down that route instead of looking for the real answers about his condition, says Joanne, who lives in Romsey, Hants, with William, now 11, and his older sister Charlotte, 13. Initially, he started to be a bit naughty and defiant, so we thought it was a behavioural issue. His handwriting declined to a scrawl, and he lost his ability to do maths, she said. She took him to a GP, and as his behaviour declined further, becoming violent and suicidal, William was referred to Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services as a priority case. They told me he definitely had autism and suggested that my husband and I go on parenting courses to learn how to deal with it. But it wasn't until Joanne joined a Facebook group for parents of children with autism that someone suggested he may have PANDAS. After reading up on it, she became convinced this was what her son had. They tried a course of antibiotics for William after persuading her reluctant GP and immediately started to see changes in his behaviour. And 4 years later, she is still battling with the mental health team that believes William does have autism. That's quite problematic. The neurologist just wanted it to be autism and wouldn't countenance anything else. We had to pay tens of thousands of pounds in medical fees to have William diagnosed properly and treated privately. He is now 98% back to his old self, playing football, doing well in his studies and enjoying life. We've been through a horrible time, but it was worth it because he's the little boy he used to be. Now, Professor Frith hopes that researchers and doctors can start looking at how autistic spectrum disorder can be broken down into more meaningful subgroups. And ironically, the term Asperger syndrome, which came to denote so-called high-functioning individuals on the autistic spectrum, is now rarely used. I think it's a pity that Asperger syndrome has gone, but I can see the reasons behind it, says Professor Frith. For example, it assumes a hierarchy between high-functioning and low-functioning individuals. However, we do need to start looking at how we can differentiate people who really do have very different problems and clinical needs. This will also improve the quality of research into the condition, she says. If everyone comes under the same banner, you end up just getting a lot of noise and no real quality data. I'm smiling here because I can relate this to Ai4Autism and how important it is to have good sound data and differentiate it from the noise when it comes to analysing it. But anyway, moving on. There is also a question of stretching limited resources and avoiding stigmatising those who have more profound needs. If autism simply becomes seen as something like being introverted and interesting, then what about the people who have incredibly challenging physical and developmental needs? I worry that it might be difficult for them to be recognised in the crowd. She welcomes a wider conversation with compassion and understanding at its core. Who really has autism or something that is like autism is one of those things that divides people very sharply, and it's a sensitive issue. But we are now getting to a point where we have to have an honest debate. I think that's an absolutely fantastic article. It's one thing to be able to diagnose correctly and then provide that individual with any support if necessary. But it's another thing entirely when someone is misdiagnosed and that misdiagnosis is held on without any improvement or understanding. And we hope that here at Ai4Autism, utilizing artificial intelligence and associated technology, that we'll be able to have a better understanding and also increase the percentage of accuracy when it comes to making a diagnosis. So what did you think about this article? Do you know someone who's been misdiagnosed? We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching this Ai4Autism video. And remember, love, life, AI, and a happy new year.